Hey folks, this is Riker, and Diablo 4 is bringing back a fan favorite feature from Diablo 3. We've also been teased that a familiar face will be returning in Season 8. And the devs have also addressed the topic of loot filters. Meanwhile, Path of Exile 2 is doubling down on towers, while also teasing a massive next update, tons of new gems coming. Last Epoch is gearing up for a huge Season 2. Monster Hunter Wilds is shattering records, but that may actually be a bad thing. We've got a lot of topics to cover this week, so get your coffee, get comfy, and don't forget to subscribe to be alerted to new Saturday episodes. But before we move on, a quick word from this video's sponsor, Incogni. You ever wonder how you get spam calls, texts, and emails? It's because thousands of companies are collecting, aggregating, and trading your personal data, and it's all legal. However, you have the right to demand that a data broker deletes whatever personal info they may have about you. Realistically though, for you to track down and contact all the companies to make that request, it's just not reasonable. That's where Incogni comes in. It's a service that does all of that for you. It reaches out to data brokers on your behalf, requests that your data be removed, and deals with any pushback they're going to give. And you'd be surprised at how much of your personal info may be out there. Not just your full name, email, and phone number, but also things like your employment history, your home address, your relatives, maybe even your social security number. So here's my dashboard. You can see that I've got 7 requests left in progress, and 110 have been completed. I've been using Incogni for years now, after I'd started getting a ton of spam texts. I don't know if it started after I signed up for some store's loyalty card, or because of a big data breach. I know LinkedIn has repeatedly had data of hundreds of millions of its users scraped and sold on the dark web. And for anyone who does a lot of online shopping, that's a ton of opportunity for your info to get out there and spread around. But after using Incogni, I barely get spam messages anymore. So take back your data, stop the spam, go to incogni.com/Riker and use code Riker to get an exclusive offer of 60% off. That's incogni.com/RHYKKER and use code Riker, or click the link below to take your personal data off the market. All right, starting with some Diablo news. Diablo 2 Resurrected is currently 66% off. So if you've been waiting to revisit the classic, now is the time to do so. Or if you've never played Diablo 2 at all, but consider yourself a fan of ARPGs in general, then this is a great way to experience the game that's responsible for establishing the ARPG scene as we know it. Meanwhile, in Diablo 4, March of the Goblins is returning on March 4th and running until March 11th. Get it? March of the Goblins? It ain't called February of the Goblins. And it seems the Wowhead data mine we spoke about last week was correct, because the event is significantly upgraded with a reputation track. And through this reputation track, we'll actually be able to increase the odds of getting loot bags to drop from goblins. But the event is also introducing a bevy of new goblins. 6 new goblin variants, each with unique loot drops, are being introduced for March of the Goblins, but they're going to be permanent additions to the game as well. They're not going away after March of the Goblins. March of the Goblins is just going to be more goblin spawning in general, as well as a predisposition for goblin packs. Now, the new goblins include Odious Ector, which is like Diablo 3's Odious Collector. These drop crafting materials, including Obdusite when you're in Torment. Then there's the Gilded Baron, also returning from D3, who drops a ton of gold. There's Glittering Prim, who will drop gem fragments, runes, and in Torment, Undercity tributes and scattered prisms. Then there's Curious Merle, who will drop Murmuring Obols. Actually, he drops a bag, technically, and that bag contains Murmuring Obols that you can open up, which is actually great because if your obols are full, then you can't pick up more. So instead, you get a bag, and then you can open that bag whenever you want. Then there's Gelatinous Cyrus, which is Diablo 3's Gelatinous Sire. This guy splits into 2 goblins when you kill him, and then those 2 split again when you kill them. Gelatinous Sires were the best goblins in D3 because each goblin was basically a whole goblin pack onto itself. Gelatinous Cyrus will be a good source of legendary items and can also drop gold, boss summoning materials, and elixirs. But the pièce de résistance is Fancy Old Fedric, who is supposed to be incredibly rare and will drop a mythic unique plus a resplendent spark. So remember a couple weeks ago we were talking about those mysterious purple goblin portals we were seeing? I guess that was Blizzard actually teasing the arrival of these new goblins, and if so, I love that. I hope we see more teasers like this moving forward. I know I'll definitely be paying more attention now to anything unusual that's happening in game to see, oh, could it be a teaser for something to come? In other D4 news, Season 7 has been extended by 2 weeks, now ending on April 29th, meaning Season 8 has been delayed, and Rod Fergusson tweeted, quote, Hey everyone, in the spirit of serving the game, not the plan, Season 8 will take a couple of weeks longer to bake than we initially anticipated. The team is hard at work on some great updates coming in the next season, so stay tuned. Looking forward to seeing an old friend. Who could this old friend be? Is it friend in quotation marks? Is this actually an enemy and he's being ironic? Or is it a friend because they're kind of a friend, but not really? Could it be the return of Diablo? I doubt Diablo would come back outside of a major story expansion. Could it be Zoltan Kuhl? He's a friend-ish. We have seen him before, though, in Season 3. But, you know, maybe the season theme for Season 8 is going to reintroduce Kanai's Cube or the Haradra Cube, in which case it makes sense to bring in Kuhl again. Could it be Wirt the Peddler? That dastardly little schmuck that... I wouldn't call him... Yeah, he's a friend. He's a real friend, right? But, you know, could it be cow level related, right? Wirt's leg? Could it be Covetous Shen? There's been some alleged data mines about Season 8 involving the island of Shansai, which I believe Covetous Shen is from there. And he's sort of like a trickster kind of guy. Anyway, folks, sound off in the comments with your guesses as to who this friend will be. This way, if you're right, then you have a handwritten, time-stamped record, and we can all go back and see that you nailed it. Now, speaking of Rod Fergusson, last week I spoke about how at a DICE talk, Rod expressed that giving players a roadmap saw an immediate increase in player counts in Diablo 4. And I was like, I don't remember ever getting a roadmap in D4. Well, Rod clarified that he was actually talking about Diablo Immortal, not Diablo 4. The on-site journalist must have misunderstood. So this, which you're looking at right now, this is a Diablo Immortal roadmap. What a thing of beauty, look at that. I would love to see a roadmap like this for Diablo 4. We know we're getting a roadmap for Diablo 4. I think it's coming in April, so we'll have to see what kind of roadmap we get. Also, quick PSA, if you're hoping for a loot filter, Blizzard basically said no in a video they released this week, in which they answered some questions about hot community topics. They effectively expressed that they want us to use every part of the animal. Basically, that trash loot serves the purpose of being broken down into crafting materials, and so this loot is actually useful to us, because without it, then we can't engage with all the various crafting systems. And sure, great point. So, counterproposal, instead of a loot filter that selectively hides loot, what about a loot filter that selectively salvages stuff automatically? You basically get to decide what kind of items that drop get automatically salvaged. You'll see the item drop, and then you see it poof into crafting materials automatically. That should solve the problem, right? Trash loot still has weight and meaning to it. We're making use of it. We're making use of it to engage with the crafting systems. But we get the enormous quality of life of it not cluttering our screens for more than a moment. We don't have to leave a bunch of stuff behind because too much stuff is dropping. We don't have to sift through the sand to find the diamonds. And we're not given the mindless task of picking up garbage, loot, and bringing it to the industrial wood chipper to get paid our salary of crafting materials. And Blizzard did say that they're not saying never to a loot filter. They're still open, as always, to feedback from the community. We also learned this week that next Friday, March 7th, there will be a campfire chat where they give us a preview of patch 2.2.0. They'll be talking about the test realm for the next season. Now, I was expecting a mid-season patch campfire before the PTR campfire for next season. So this is a surprise and kind of suggests that we're actually not getting a campfire for the mid-season patch. And we actually got some patch notes as well this week for a patch releasing on March 4th. And looking at the contents, I think this is actually serving as the mid-season patch because it includes some buffs to every class on underperforming builds, as well as buffs to underperforming witch powers. Oh, but best of all in the patch notes, turbo buffs to the Conduit Shrine. They are being adjusted to aggressively scale with player level and Paragon level. The example they gave was that the average increase in damage from a Conduit Shrine in Torment 3 has been increased by a factor of 37. So, hopefully this finally makes these worth grabbing in Torment 4. And lastly, folks, in case you missed it, I posted a video this week about my predictions about Diablo 4's next expansion. So do check that out and let me know if your predictions line up with mine. Moving on to some Path of Exile news, Grinding Gear Games has announced that the current Freesia event in PoE 1 will be extended by another month, running until late April. This means more time to explore the 19 new Ascendancies, but it also means more time spent with the idol system, which is not exactly a beloved replacement for the Atlas tree for many players. Now, on the trade market, good idols can get really pricey, making them inaccessible for a lot of players, or otherwise requiring a ton of grinding, farming up of divine orbs in order to be able to afford them. And with no option to craft on these at all, players are really feeling a lack of agency where they previously were able to express a lot of agency. Here's the thing though, the fun part of idols is being able to just push mechanics to levels you normally couldn't, and if you don't turn it into a job to farm all those divines, to min-max your idols, and just kind of treat this as a fun, non-serious event, it's not so bad. Overall, this is definitely the best event in PoE history. Sure, it's not an actual league, of course, but remember, they also said more will come before next league. Meanwhile, Path of Exile 2's 0.2.0 update is bringing a ton of new support gems, as well as major changes to the tower system, though those changes aren't exactly being met with cheers. Now, towers have been a contentious part of PoE2's endgame since early access launch. Players have been complaining about towers, and in response, GGG deployed an update early on that added new tower layouts, looking to add some variety there to towers, but many players felt this did not resolve the underlying issue with towers. Now, GGG revealed that they plan to allow towers to be able to spawn with mechanics. Towers can also now have content added by tablets from other towers. Because, yo dog, we heard you like tower juice, so now you can juice your towers while you tower for juice. I gotta fire my scriptwriters. Anyway, some players are seeing this as GGG just doubling down on towers when they really want to see towers completely overhauled or just removed altogether. From the start, a suggestion that I would see that seemed pretty reasonable and a lot of people agreed with was just make towers a straight up boss fight every time. But one thing to bear in mind, folks, is that PoE 1, its endgame underwent multiple overhauls over the years. GGG will get things right eventually. Completely overhauling the tower system likely isn't high on their list of priorities right now when there's still so much more content to add to the game, but that doesn't mean it's not on their list of priorities at all. But what's your take on towers, folks? Sound off in the comments. Now, the devs released a neat video showcasing a fight between two PoE 2 bosses, Silverfist versus Wrathbreaker, and I gotta say, it was really exciting to watch. I can actually see these being set up as live events. We watch it on Twitch. It's like a whole spectacle, like a WWE match or something, right? Set up a 16-boss tournament, let viewers place bets somehow with either in-game currency or just Twitch channel points or something. I was at the edge of my seat. I believe they did something similar with PoE 1, but PoE 2 boss designs really take things to the next level. Then in other ARPG news, Last Epoch is dropping its second season, Tombs of the Erased, on April 2nd, and it's bringing a ton of new content. We got a sick reveal trailer. This update's going to introduce a brand new faction called the Woven, new dungeons, new enemies, new items and uniques, new crafting mats, even endgame set item crafting is going to be introduced. There's also a rework to the Sentinel, a new rogue skill called Heartseeker. Sounds familiar. And something a lot of players have been asking for, Mastery Respecs. But the biggest surprise, WASD movement support. It's going to be in beta, but still. After playing Path of Exile 2, a lot of ARPG players are getting used to this movement style, even though technically it's been available in D4 for a while now. But it's really PoE 2 that has pushed the envelope to make WASD feel compulsory in the genre going forward. So it's great to see Last Epoch adapting to these modern trends. They started off with the dodge roll, now they're going with WASD as well. Now, Last Epoch hasn't done all that much since it launched a year ago, at least compared to the competition, but this update may just be worth the wait. Are you folks excited for Season 2? And how do you feel about WASD movement in ARPGs? Sound off in the comments. In other news, Fable has officially been pushed back to 2026. Playground Games says they want to make the best game possible, so they're taking more time. And I guess in order to quench our thirst in the meantime, the devs revealed some pre-alpha gameplay. And given the game's development started in 2018, it's kind of wild that they're still in pre-alpha 7 years later. It's definitely good that they're taking the time they need rather than just pushing it across the finish line. Microsoft really has just one shot to bring back the Fable series. Fable 3, released in 2010, 15 years ago. There won't be a Fable 5 if this one flops. From the pre-alpha footage, it looks like Fable still has that signature charm and humor. I mean, there's chicken punting, and if that's not a sign that they're staying true to the series, I don't know what is. Visually, the game looks great, but some fans are wondering if it's moving too far away from Fable's cartoonish aesthetic. Each game in the series has gradually leaned towards a more realistic storybook fantasy style, and it looks like this one is continuing that trend. At the end of the day, a delay is better than a buggy, rushed mess, but Microsoft really needs to start delivering on these long-announced projects. In 2020, they announced Perfect Dark, State of Decay 3, Everwild, and Fable, and 5 years later, none of these games have a release date yet. Now, they did announce Avowed in 2020 as well, and they released that one this year, so props for that. And that takes us to some Avowed news. We learned that the game had a 6-year development cycle, and it actually underwent 2 full reboots during this time. Originally, development had kicked off in 2018, just as Obsidian was gearing up to sell itself after 15 years of independence. Later that year, Microsoft bought the studio, and 2 years after that, they officially announced Avowed to the world. But behind the scenes, things weren't exactly smooth sailing. Obsidian had to restart development twice to get things on track. Now, the good news is the game is out, and Obsidian is happy with its sales. The game's been doing well. Players seem to love how much their choices actually matter, which is something a lot of RPGs claim but don't always deliver on. And it looks like this is just the beginning as well for Avowed. Obsidian has hinted at DLC or sequels, saying that they want to keep building on the world they've created. The game's director said, quote, "Now that we've built this wonderful world and also built this team strength and muscle memory around the content and gameplay in this world, I'd love to see us do more with it." Meanwhile, Obsidian's Josh Sawyer, aka the guy behind Fallout New Vegas, Pillars of Eternity, and Pentiment, has been talking about what the studio might work on next. Now, one idea floating around is a tactical strategy game set in the Pillars of Eternity universe. But the challenge is that while tactics fans are loyal, the audience isn't massive, so it's a tough sell financially. Either way, Obsidian is one of the last great ARPG studios standing, and they seem committed to expanding the world of Eora. Now, have you folks played Avowed yet? And if so, what would you rather see next? DLC, a sequel, or a completely different game in the setting? Let me know in the comments. Then in some sad news, Dauntless is officially getting the axe. Phoenix Labs announced that the free-to-play monster hunting RPG will go offline on May 29th, with no more content or updates beyond that date. This news comes right after massive layoffs at the studio, which saw the majority of the staff let go. So, what went wrong here? Well, it's a classic case of bad business decisions ruining a good game. Phoenix Labs bought itself out from its parent company using venture capital in 2023. The thing is that venture capital came from a cryptocurrency firm, and once these guys took control, things went downhill fast. The monetization model got a massive rework, not in a good way. The new owners basically removed weapon crafting as something accessible to free-to-play players. Instead of earning weapons by hunting monsters, players either had to grind for dozens of hours or pay real money to get the gear they wanted. It was a blatant cash grab, and players were not having any of that. Steam reviews basically tanked overnight, and what was once a well-loved Monster Hunter Lite quickly became a pay-to-win disaster. The worst part wasn't even just the mismanagement by the new overlords. It looks like they knew the studio was going under months before, with a big wave of layoffs hitting last May. So it seems like they just tried to squeeze as much money out of players as possible before pulling the plug. Dauntless had its moments, but greed killed it. It's unfortunate. I feel bad for the devs. I feel bad for players, especially fans of the game. I remember I tried Dauntless way back in the day, and I thought it was pretty good. And continuing on with some brutal industry news, WB Games just shut down Monolith Productions, as well as Player First Games and WB San Diego. And with that, the Wonder Woman game is officially dead as well. For those keeping score, Monolith was the studio behind the Middle-earth games, Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. They also did the Fear games. They did No One Lives Forever, Alien vs. Predator 2, the Blood games. Remember those back in the day? Other classics as well. Player First made multiverses, and WB San Diego focused on mobile and free-to-play games. But Monolith's closure is especially painful here because it likely means we'll never see another Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War, or the awesome Nemesis system that came with these games. They pioneered this system and it became locked away now, and a WB-owned vault until 2036 because it's patented until that date. The whole situation is just a mess. After Shadow of War, which was their last game, published in 2017, Monolith, they wanted to make a new IP, but WB basically just strung them along for 4 years before canceling that project. And at that point, most of the studio's leadership and senior talent quit to form a new team. And that team is now working on a Black Panther game, but that's a whole other story, I guess. And then at that point, what was left of Monolith got assigned to Wonder Woman, but development was in shambles. Again, they just lost a ton of talent. WB forced them to restart the game in the Unreal Engine after years of work. And that brings us to today, where instead of finishing the game, they decided to just shut down the whole studio. Monolith was founded in 1994. It became a subsidiary of WB in 2004. 30 years and many successful games since its founding, and they are now being shut down. And all this comes as WB's gaming division is hemorrhaging money, reporting a 29% revenue drop year on year in Q4 2024. Their new plan now is focusing on proven IPs, meaning from now on they're all in on Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Mortal Kombat, and DC, because those franchises have each pulled in over $1 billion in sales in the past. Now, just to clear up a bit about the Nemesis system and its patent. First, a brief overview of what the Nemesis system is. To be brief, orcs in the game, rather than just being random mooks, they're each randomly given a name, different stats, even personalities and dialogue trees. Nothing quite groundbreaking yet, but if they kill you, then they level up, they grow in power, and they potentially also rise within the hierarchy of orc society. So when you face them again in the future, and you will, they'll actually remember you, and their dialogue will reflect that. It just makes the game much more personalized and immersive, and you feel like you got a unique experience that other players aren't getting, with each playthrough possibly resulting in different evolutions of this orc society that you're facing. WB patented this system, which has led many people to believe that no one else can replicate the system, but in truth, the patent just covers the very precise way that the Nemesis system works in Monolith's games. If another dev really wanted to make something similar, they could. The patent is specific enough that you can just go in there, read what it is, and not do those exact things. Then in some EA news, BioWare's co-founder Greg Zeshik just dropped some spicy behind-the-scenes info about his time under EA. On the podcast My Perfect Console, he revealed that working for EA wasn't exactly his dream gig. Shocking, I know. EA acquired BioWare back in 2007, and within just 2 years, Zeshik realized big corporate life just wasn't for him. He said that EA, quote, gives you enough rope to hang yourself. Ouch. Now, Anthem would be a classic example of this. EA agreed to a 6-year dev period for Anthem, and they basically left BioWare be until a year and a half away from the 6-year deadline, at which point EA realized BioWare still basically didn't have anything, and they cracked the whip, forcing BioWare to actually get stuff done and cobble together the mess that we saw at launch. Now, Zeshik admitted that BioWare managed to thrive for a while under EA, pointing to the early success of Mass Effect. But his real problem was EA's franchise-first mindset. He said, quote, big companies exist to exploit properties. They exist to exploit games. Most of the big North American guys, they're just good at squeezing the most money out of a franchise. This is why he eventually retired from BioWare in 2012. But here's a plot twist for you. In other EA news, EA is also doing something good. They just handed over the source code for several classic Command & Conquer games to modders for free. That means Tiberian Dawn, Red Alert, Renegade, and Generals are now open for community tinkering with full Steam Workshop support for a bunch of Command & Conquer titles. Apparently EA had even commissioned a well-known modder, Luke CC Hyper Feenan, to restore the old CNC source codes. So on one hand, you got EA being accused of running studios into the ground and then killing them after bleeding the rocks dry. On the other hand, they're out there actually supporting classic game preservation and modding. I don't know how to feel anymore. Let me know how you feel, folks. What do you think of this? What is your impression and feeling of EA now? Then in some Monster Hunter news, Monster Hunter Wilds dropped, and well, it's a tale of two platforms. On OpenCritic, it's sitting pretty. It's got 89 out of 100 average critic score. 95% of critics are recommending it. So on paper, it's another home run for Capcom, right? But over on Steam, only 47% of reviews are positive. And the reason? Horrific PC performance. We're talking unacceptable optimization, frame drops, stuttering, crashes. The kind of launch that makes you wonder if they even tested the game on PC at all before shipping it. But despite all that, Monster Hunter Wilds still managed to sell 1 million copies in just 6 hours, making it Capcom's most successful PC launch ever. It even surpassed the peak concurrent player numbers of Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, and Hogwarts Legacy, hitting a jaw-dropping 1.3 million concurrent players at once on Steam. Not bad for a company that once thought PC gaming wasn't even worth the effort. So, are you folks playing Monster Hunter Wilds right now? And if so, is your PC surviving the experience? Let me know in the comments. Because that's going to wrap up this video, but do be sure to check out last week's video in which we talk about the retirement of one of the most important names in the ARPG scene. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join Rikers Raiders for more gaming content.